Demon engines are gigantic battle machines that prowl on mighty piston-driven limbs. To compare a demon engine to an ordinary vehicle is folly, for each of these beasts has its own malevolent sentience rather than a crew. Bound within the battle-scarred metal of each demon engine is the essence of a raging warp entity, imprisoned in a physically indomitable body in order to better serve the Chaos Space Marines in their long and bitter war. The Imperium has little concept of how these affronts to sanity came into being. Even amongst the ranks of the Chaos Space Marines, there are few who understand how these monsters are created. Only the Brotherhood of the Warpsmiths can bind a demon into a machine, using corrupt rituals and forbidden alchemy. Adepts of the Dark Arts can force immaterial spirits into a physical shell. It is the Warpsmiths that bring demon engines into being, from minor gun beasts to chaos titans. Beyond the soul forges of the Immaterium, creatures of the warp are bound in nooses of rope woven from the hair of murderers, or with chains fashioned of scrimshawed bone. These captive demons are dragged screaming into the flame-hearted citadels of the Dark Mechanicum. In the molten heat of the forges, Warpsmiths trap these demons within the rune-bound halls of the giant metal abominations they have created. The screaming fiends must then be bludgeoned into submission until the time of battle is at hand. Dozens of machine thralls are lost within the creation of each beast, a minor setback given the raw power these monsters provide. Forge Fiends. The Forge Fiend was originally devised to sow death amongst enemy forces from afar. Roughly centauroid in form, the torso of this demon engine boasts twin weapon mounts that carry Hellforged parodies of Imperial armaments. The most common Forge Fiends are created with pairs of Hades autocannons in place of their primary limbs, rotary gun clusters that allow them to scythe down masses of enemy troops, and even lightly armored vehicles with contemptuous ease. When a demon engine is forged in the citadels of the warp, part of the fire that burns there is transferred into the heart of the engine itself. It is this brimstone-scented furnace that powers the engine's mechanical motion, but also that provides the baleful energies it pours into the ranks of its foe. It is not normal bullets that fly from the muzzles of the Forge Fiend's guns. Instead, it spits out red-hot phosphor shells that are extruded from the twisting, convoluted cables that churn and writhe inside. Hidden intestinal tracts feed steaming, large-bore ammunition into each autocannon's chambers, each projectile bearing the taint of demonic flame. Forge Fiends can devour metal just as easily as flesh. When well fed, they can maintain a glowing salvo of shells for several minutes before stopping to gorge load more raw materials into their interior feed hoppers. The pulsing energies of a Forge Fiend's furnace are not always employed to produce solid ammunition. Some sport flex-sheathed plasma weapons of ancient design, weapons so large they would look more at home on a light aircraft than a land-bound walker. Those demon beasts the Imperium have nicknamed Cerebrites bear no less than 3 of these ectoplasma cannons, one mounted on each weapon limb and one jutting out from their maws. These cannons were once prized artifacts dating back to before the heresy, but the Warpsmiths have perverted them into something far worse. Gargoyle mouths and drizzling balefire, the searing energies these devastating weapons hurl outwards are a hybrid of plasma and burning ectoplasm channeled straight from the Forge Fiend's tainted heart. The demon engines known as Mauler Fiends thunder towards the foe like monstrous attack dogs loosed from the leash. Their eyes glow with balefire as ectoplasmic drool drizzles from their fanged maws. Their thick front limbs end in articulated claws powerful enough to tear a dreadnought limb from limb. Should they catch a squad of infantry, they will scissor them apart or crush them into a paste with a flex of their massive talons. Also known as stalkers or scalers, Mauler Fiends have strength and agility enough to climb sheer surfaces. Nowhere is safe from these demon engines, once they have the scent of their prey in their olfactory vents. If even a single Mauler Fiend makes it to the walls of an enemy emplacement, it will clamber across the vertical faces, tapping with its claw pincers until it finds the weak points before peeling open a large section and forcing its way inside. Because of their utility in siege warfare, Mauler Fiends are used extensively by the Warpsmiths of the Iron Warriors. Even the most redoubtable Imperial strongholds will fall into deathly silence once a Mauler Fiend has breached the walls and set upon the fleshy bounty within. Some Warpsmiths and Chaos Lords see their Mauler Fiends as a feudal knight might see his fiercest warhounds, and set them loose on heavily armored targets with much the same sense of prideful satisfaction. When a Mauler Fiend has latched onto its quarry, its destruction is all but assured. The magma cutters that protrude from the Mauler Fiend's torso can focus the anger that burns inside it into a white-hot jet of flame that can melt through the thick rockrit of a bastion wall. Many an Imperial Titan has been felled by a pair of Mauler Fiends clambering up its legs and shearing through its joints points with pinpoint energy blasts and raking adamantium claws. Some Mauler Fiends serve their masters as demonic battering rams that barrel headlong through the enemy lines. They defend themselves from counterattacks with segmented tendrils that whip out from their midsections to crush and confuse those who would attempt to stay their advance. They defend themselves from counterattacks with segmented tendrils that whip out from their midsections to crush and confound those who would attempt to stay their advance. These lashers gorge themselves on the hot flesh of their victims until their blunt muzzles drip with blood, even though they can take no sustenance from the flesh of mortals. Helldrakes. Helldrakes are winged demon engines that plummet out of the skies like living comets, hurtling towards enemy aircraft and crashing claws first into them from above. Each is a vicious hellforged predator. A Helldrake takes cruel joy in diving down upon the unsuspecting air sport of the enemy in order to shred them to pieces with his scything wings and rune-carved talons. Helldrakes were once noble fighter craft flown by spacemarine pilots, though they have become something far more hideous. The energies of the warp have granted them a form better suited to the predatory role their twisted spirits savor, though Helldrakes have the sweeping wings and powerful engines common to all Chaos fighter craft, for their aspect is one of flying demonic reptiles more than any ordinary aircraft. The miasma of wrongness that surrounds these fell creatures is due not only to their monstrous hybridization, but also to the keening anguish of what remains of the individuals that used to pilot the machines. The steersmen inside the Helldrakes, having become consumed by the power and independence granted them by their fighter, have literally become one with their vehicles. At first the transformation is of the body. The pilots shrink back into the interiors of their machines until they see with the craft's autosenses and speak with its vox grills. Eventually, as the machines themselves achieve demonic sentience, the transformation affects the pilot's souls. After so many centuries swooping through the warp as pitiless hunters, the steersmen's spirits meld with that of their war engines until they are entirely subsumed. The pilot's physical forms become atrophied, photo balls that burn deep in the cores where natural beasts would keep their hearts. Trapped and subservient to the murderous desires of the demons with which they share their prisons, the withered, blackened pilots scream in the darkness, their trauma and rage magnified by the vox rays of the Helldrakes into haunting cries. Often, the first sign of a full-scale Chaos Space Marine invasion will come in the form of an attack by Helldrakes. These metallic monstrosities traverse the void between worlds by clinging to the underside of Chaos Space Marine attack ships, wings folded protectively around themselves in the manner of bats and piston-driven claws clamped onto the fuselage above. Umbilical cables, sheathed in the organic webbing, probe outward from each Helldrake's body to burrow through the host's warship's outer surface, drawing away energy as leeches draw blood. When the warships near low orbit, the Helldrakes detach themselves, unfurling their wings as they plummet towards the airspace of the victim planet. Some will soar through the skies as heralds of the destruction to come, retractable weapons pushing out from their gullets and spitting volleys of red-hot bullets that cut down the scrambling earthbound defenders below. Others prefer to plunge through the clouds into the crucible of battle, screaming in savage joy as they crash headlong into the fight. Defilers. Defilers are truly massive beasts of war, twice the size of most other demon engines and with a temperament to match. The ground shivers and melts as they stalk towards their foes on 6 massive segmented legs, their great pincer arms twitching and snipping with an impatient need to slice through warm flesh. The Defiler's crab-like body supports a demonic torso that carries an array of deadly weaponry, ranging from Reaper autocannons to racks of highly explosive missiles. It is the battle cannon mounted in its chest turret, however, that is undoubtedly the most potent armament. Each Hellforged shell that thunders out from its growling muzzle is capable of crippling a squad of Space Marines in a single earth-shaking blast. The warpsmiths who create these nightmarish constructions originally devised them to be walking artillery pieces, though their obsession with destruction soon saw their creations becoming ever more bestial and aggressive. Over time, the multi-leg chassis that bears the Defilers to war has been adapted to include shearing claws and spiked armor plates. Its extremities are often fitted with subsidiary weapons, such as modified autocannons, heavy flamers, and combi weapons that spew firepower as the demon engine storms forward. Those foes fortunate enough to survive a Defiler's barrage of shells must then face its full fury at close quarters. Built with piston-driven claws to grab and crush the enemy and boasting whirring blades or whip-like flails mounted on articulated limbs, the Defiler charges into the foe, crushing and grinding as it smashes aside all opposition. Its mechanical growls drown out the cries of the wounded and dying. Trampled corpses and severed limbs are left scattered in a red path behind it as the Defiler rampages through the enemy's ranks. Like many of the Warpsmith's creations, a Defiler's animus is provided by a bound demon of chaos. When the immortal ire of this imprisoned entity is raised, the Defiler powers forwards on its clanking legs, spewing death with its guns. The Defiler rejoices in battle, for only then can it enjoy the blissful release of slaughter. Once the feeble warriors of the Corpse God have been crushed, the Defiler will once more be bound in runic chains by its masters and dragged hissing back to the forges until it is needed once more. Hellbrutes. Hellbrutes are twisted mockeries of the Space Marine dreadnoughts they used to be, combining the firepower of a small tank with the mind of a frenzied maniac. Each Hellbrute holds a living creature within its plated metal chest, a Chaos Space Marine driven over the edge of madness by a never-ending cycle of war. A Hellbrute is piloted by a warrior who has suffered extreme damage on the field of battle. The critically injured warrior is then bound into an amniotic sarcophagus at the walker's heart, connected by nervous system implants and mind impulse units to the controls of the battle engine. However, while loyalist members of the Adeptus Astartes consider it an honor to serve their chapter for eternity as a dreadnought, Chaos Space Marines consider such a fate to be little more than a living death, a torturous mocking punishment from the dark gods. They abhor the thought of such a miserable half-life locked away in a dank and imprisoning womb, where they can no longer drink in the sights of battle with their own eyes or feel the kick of a bolt gun in their fist. For them, it would be better to die and find final release in the maelstrom of the warp than to spend eternity locked in an adamantium shell. As a result, most Hellbrutes are completely psychotic even before the warp melds the metal of their prison with the flesh inside. A creeping insanity mingled with desperation and fury eats away at them over the long millennia. Between battles, the sarcophagus containing the pilot is disconnected and dragged clear of its armored shell to lie inert and seething in the darkness. The Hellbrute is chained like a beast when it is not actually fighting, for fear that some residue of the pilot's soul may send it into a berserk rampage. As the ships of a Chaos Space Marine fleet approach their prey, the Hellbrute's heavy weapons are prepared and loaded, its power scourges and hammer-like fists are daubed in fresh blood, and a sarcophagus is installed. The madness of the Chaos Space Marine within burns ever fiercer as he rises from his dormancy. Once the fleet's warriors have landed, the Hellbrute is unleashed, a lunatic beast of flesh and metal intent upon venting its rage on everything in its path. The Lord of Skulls. Grinding across the battlefield on rumbling tracks, the Lord of Skulls towers over its terrified foes. The very ground cracks apart in its wake, yawning chasms gaping wide to vomit skulls and fire onto the battlefield. Given life by the raging spirit of a bloodthirster bound within its hull, and powered by the boiling blood of murderers, this unholy engine of war is death to all who stand before it. Its devastating guns reduce swaths of victims to ruin, drowning them in jets of red-hot gore or burying them under rains of gnashing skulls. As it plows through the enemy ranks, the demon engine wields its roaring cleaver with a speed and skill that is horrifying in something so huge. Entire ranks of enemy warriors are swept away with a single swing, tanks and monstrous beasts swatted through the air like toys. Even towering war engines such as Stompas or Titans are made to look clumsy and sluggish as the Lord of Skulls hacks off their limbs and tears open their armored torsos amid blossoms of dirty flame. Few warriors can face the Lord of Skulls and live, for it is a machine of absolute destruction. Being the brazen vessels of bloodthirsters, many Lords of Skulls are worshipped by the Demonkin, and followed into battle as living altars of cornate worship. Their track guards will be heaped with skulls and runic fetishes, offerings made by the warriors who charge to war in their shadow. Their every deed is met by howls of adulation from the blood-mad throng, the Demonkin inspired to new heights of fanatical devotion by the Lord of Skulls' unstoppable rampage. The renegades of the Wrath pay a special heed to rumors of a Lord of Skulls rampaging across the material dimension, seeking it out and fighting in its wake, the better to see one of Khorne's masterpieces in action. Most warp entities rage against their incarceration in a demon engine, but there are those few that see their cage as the perfect weapon. This is the most common amongst bloodthirsters of the 8th rank, some of whom see the Lord of Skulls as a suit of armor within which they may wage war on the denizens of real space.